I'm Todd Jones, recovering from 30 years as a sports writer. Thanks for joining me as I sit down with some of the best sports writers of our time, who knew the greatest athletes and coaches and experienced firsthand some of the biggest sports moments of the past half century. We'll share stories behind the stories, some we've only told each other. Pull up a seat on Press Box Access. We're pleased to be joined by Rick Telander today, and Rick's been one of my favorite writers over the years, so I'm really thrilled about him joining us. He's a senior sports columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times since 1995, and he spent many, many years at Sports Illustrated as a senior writer from 74 to 98, and he also has written for ESPN on different platforms. He's been on TV, radio, you name it, Rick's done it. Rick, thanks a lot for joining us. I really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure, Todd.
Well, there's no cigar smoke here. I got to tell you, it's not like your days from the sports writers on TV.
That's okay. I breathed enough as a young man to make up for anything now.
I was curious, like, how are your lungs after all those years of sitting next to Gleason?
Well, they're good. Bill Gleason, and Ben Bentley had to smoke cigars. It's almost like I compared it to a little kid with a pacifier. And you could not make them not smoke. And that was just the deal. And one time I came in, some cigar smoke billowing in this room that actually was very detrimental to the lights and the cameras and all that in the studio. And those guys didn't care. It's too bad, clean it, whatever. The particulate matter in there, clean it up. So one time I came in and I went out and got a very cheap gas mask, a yellow thing that went over my ears and all that stuff. Yeah, I wore it. And I breathed okay. Thing is, you couldn't hear me. It's like, woo, 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 woo. So I had to take that off. I got a little miniature fan to blow the smoke towards them. None of it worked. I just sucked it up.
Well, I got to tell you, I watched that show religiously back in my days as a sports writer, and, it was one of my favorite shows. But I think I have secondhand smoke problems just from watching it on television. So.
Well, one time we had a little fire in the ashtray. It was a great big ashtray, big cigar ashtray. Ben Bentley was firing up his cigar, dropped a match in there, and everything lit on fire. And we were live, Kate was going live, and like he's panicking. It went out eventually, but it was pretty interesting too.
Yeah, those weren't just cigars; those things look like telephone poles.
Yeah, I know. And when they weren't lit, they could just gum them. It'd be this chaw in the corner of their mouth. I love those guys, man. That's the old days. I've even tried smoking cigars, with friends to sit around. And try. It's okay every now and then, but oh my God, to have one every day, it would be, it'd just be torture.
Well, we've never shared a cigar. We did on my 40th birthday at the 2006 British Open in St. Andrews. You and I and Marla Ridenour celebrated in a pub in St. Andrews, and that's how I rang in my 40th.
I remember that well, Todd. It was so smoky in there. They could still smoke, and I thought, right. I don't know, man, it was low ceiling and everything, but boy, how about that, being in St. Andrews? Was that not an awesome
that place? Oh, my gosh. And in fact, you could just walk right off the 18th green, and there's a pub. Amazing.
Yeah. Yes, there was. There are all kinds of things, and as soon as the golfers were done, they opened up the whole course like a park. And people just walked all over because it's like cement, the fairways anyhow. It's a links course right there, that huge beach, gigantic beach. And when we were there, Todd, it was very interesting. You're used to seeing just horrendous weather, winds and rain coming sideways. We were there. It was hot. It was wonderful. Yeah. It was sunny. Oh, it was magnificent.
I was almost disappointed in the fact that we didn't get that crazy Scottish weather that you associate with the British Open. I do remember, like you said, they opened the course up at night and people were walking around like it's a regular park. And I remember seeing a dog taking a crap on the 18th fairway the night before the final round. And I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah, that was really something. You could hit a drive if you had a good roll. It seems to me like they would just go out of sight and just continue on. You see this thing rolling past somebody's drive. You don't even know where it came from because it was essentially a runway, a lot of those things. But if you got in trouble in the, the deep, whatever they call that stuff, the gorse or
those bushes, right.
Yeah, whatever, man. It was like you'd never find your ball. So
no. No. I could never find my ball anyway, no matter where I'm playing. So, So, Rick, what a career. I mean, 50 years basically. When you think about all the different places you've been and things that you covered, we're going to talk a lot of football and basketball. But I wanted to start with football because, one thing I used to hear from people when they were pissed at me was, hey, you didn't actually play. You know what, though, Rick Telander, you actually played football. You played college football at Northwestern. How were you as a player? I know you got drafted, right, by the NFL?
Yeah, I got drafted by the Chiefs. As I like to say, they gave me a cup of coffee and didn't even fill it. And then Hank Stram basically said, Rick, it's time for you to get on with your career.
Yeah, Hank said it was time for you to matriculate your way into some other field.
Hank Stram was not only the coach, he was also the general manager. So anyway, they said, well, listen, somebody said, this is a good strategy I've heard. Tell them that if they don't give you more money, you're going to go to law school. And he said, Rick, you went to Northwestern. That sounds logical. Like, maybe you're some smart dude or something. So anyway, I did float that with Hank Stram. And he said, oh, okay. And he gave me $500 more, my bonus, but he took it off of my salary if I were to make the team. I didn't care. I got $3,000 as a bonus. It was $2,500. I worked him up to $3,000. It's a lot of money back in 1971, more than I'd ever made. I took that check from the Chiefs, really nicely printed, and put it on the this mirror in the front room of this house, this dilapidated old 3-story house where a bunch of us guys were living. I just left it there.
It's very interesting that training camp experience, getting cut as an 8th-round draft pick with the Chiefs, actually led to your writing career directly.
Yeah, it did. One thing that I tell young writers, aspiring writers, if you're going to write nonfiction, it's hard just to get right into fiction, but what's unique about your life? And believe me, everybody's life is unique. You need to figure out what that is. I wanted to write for Sports Illustrated. That was my dream job. I never really told anybody I wanted to be a writer. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to make a living at it. I didn't want to just be a guy in an attic somewhere starving and, with consumption, blanket wrapped around him, a little candle for heat, typing away.
Wait a minute. You mean kind of like me right now?
Well, I did have my moments that were similar to that. But I wanted to write for Sports Illustrated, and I had read the magazine forever. Sports Illustrated was really a big deal back then. I mean, that was it.
Oh, it was like the sports Bible. I mean, it was literature.
Only 4-color weekly sports magazine in the world. And it's great expense that they spent putting that thing out. So anyway, that was my dream. And if I was going to do that, I had read different sections of the magazine. And if I were going to offer anything, I knew I couldn't write to them and say, hey, I want to cover the World Series for you. What do you think? But maybe I could write about my own experience, which nobody else had. Have you had anybody else who was in an NFL training camp who got cut, has to get on with his life, whatever, how pitiful his whole life is? Have you ever had anybody write a first-person story about that? And the editor, Pat Ryan, said, I didn't say that in so many words, told her what I thought maybe I could do. And she said, yeah, you know what? That is interesting. So do it on speculation. We'll pay you $1,000 if we run it.
Almost as much as Hank was paying you.
Oh, God, man, I'm so rich. I can live on $1,000 for about 6 months. Anyway, I wrote it. Took me a long time. I agonized. I got it in, and they actually ran it. And that was the start of it. So that playing football was the one thing that I had that kind of separated me, and I think I've been able to utilize that throughout my career. What did I do different? What have I seen different? And I'm sure you have, Todd, too, in your column writing and all reporting. We all have that. People just have to look and say, what is it that I have that nobody else has?
Mm-hmm. Find your distinct voice, and what do you know? And at the time, you knew what it was like to be cut, and you wrote the story, Football Like a Rose, and that story for Sports Illustrated became your first book, From Red Ink to Roses. You wrote that first article and that first book by hand. You didn't type.
Absolutely. I wrote Heaven is a Playground, which was my very first book, 600 pages of yellow legal pad and a pencil in longhand. And then I had found somebody to type it for me because I couldn't type.
You
Never
couldn't
could.
type. You
No.
wanted to be a writer, but you couldn't type.
Exactly. Exactly.
You're like Abe Lincoln by the fire, just writing on a legal pad.
Well, just get a piece of charcoal and do it on a wall of a cave. I mean, I still can't really type, but it's irrelevant if you're using a laptop, whether you can type or not. You can hunt and peck. There's still some guys I've seen the press box, just rare, who use actually one finger, not one finger on each hand, but one finger, and type. And pretty much as fast as anybody because, you just erase, delete, write it over.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a real issue not being able to type there at the beginning. Yes.
Well, in the 70s, right, you could just do things a little differently, as long as you got it done.
I did actually write a couple stories for Sports Illustrated. I printed them. I was at games or whatever, but I couldn't type. I literally, it would take me forever because you had to hit that key and the hammer had to hit, and if you made a mistake, you're supposed to go back and use whiteout or a little piece of paper that had white on it. It was a miserable experience, so I actually would print them out as legibly as I could, and then there was a guy, his name was Lance, loved that kid, he was a kid, and he was from Western Union, and he'd come and grab the things, and somehow, I don't know, they put it in one of those rollers or whatever, and away would go. And, and it worked. So somebody in New York would then type up this chicken scratching that I'd done. It was pitiful. I got to admit, it was really sad.
Pony Express, that thing to New York, right? I think my kids say to me, Dad, are you using a stone tablet and a chisel? What is that? Well, you played football, you wrote by hand, and you actually learned to type, and you started writing full-time at Sports Illustrated in 74 and stayed there for 24 years. And you also, besides playing football, went on to write a lot of football. I think in the 80s, you were like the college football writer at Sports Illustrated, and that was quite a time for college football when you think about it. Oklahoma, Lou Holtz and the Irish at Notre Dame were rolling. The U, Miami Hurricanes. What was it like in the mid 80s, late 80s, covering college football?
Well, I think I can say without any hyperbole that it was crazy. It was the Wild West in the entire country. Every place. It was nuts. The stuff that was going on at Oklahoma, I mean, that's when there would be guns in the dormitory. There was a gang rape. The Charles Thompson, the quarterback for Oklahoma, a guy that I liked, I ended up visiting him at Big Spring, Texas Penitentiary.
Yeah, he ended up on the cover of Sports Illustrated handcuffed.
Yeah, in an orange jumpsuit, and there's your starting quarterback, and he's a drug dealer. I mean, big time drug dealer. It was really wild what was going on everywhere. And it was completely out of hand. It was almost like college football was waiting for some kind of regulation, for somebody to come and say, my God, there's SMU paying players, the Pony Express paying Jerry Ball, and God, I mean, it was nuts. And then the governor of Texas, after they kind of stopped that deal, he said, well, these fellows have been counting on that money so much, like in these envelopes, that it's kind of wrong to not keep paying them. And so they did. And then SMU got the death penalty. It was wild. And at that time, Todd, there was really nobody else who was covering the whole country in college football, flying from Washington, say, to Miami, to Oklahoma, to Texas, to Ohio State, the whole Southwest Conference, Southern Cal, on and on. And all the Big Ten teams, and putting it all together, like, what is the big picture? So it was almost surreal. There might have been, I don't know who else was doing it in the whole country. People were focused on their conference or their team in their city, whoever they were playing. But I was going here, there, and everywhere, and I would talk to coaches. They didn't know anything that I knew. I mean, they were like, really? That's going on out there or down here? Or
yeah, you think about how we weren't connected back then. Right?
No internet, no cell phones. If you wanted to find out something, USA Today hadn't even started. In the 70s, it didn't come out till the 80s, but there was no way to find out facts to get them. You had to call the PR guy. You had to go to the place, wherever, the athletic department at that particular school to actually find out what was going on. It was it was stimulating. It was crazy. I still don't think I've recovered.
Well, tell us a story about, like, just showing up at Oklahoma. What was it like? You show up at Oklahoma. Barry Switzer's the coach, and welcome, Rick. Welcome to our football program. What's that like?
Well, the PR guys, you'd have to deal with the PR guys. I liked them all, but they were always trying to steer you away from the scandals, whatever the scandals might be. Ineligibility, payola, whatever, coaches having affairs with other coaches' wives, stuff like that. And then actual crime, serious crime. University of Colorado in on that stuff too. Mm-hmm. And so say, hey, Barry, how you doing? Go to his office and shoot the breeze with him. He was, he wrote he had an autobiography. It's called Bootlegger's Boy. Not like I coach men or I'm a football guy. Bootlegger's Boy. His dad
Which I think is very honest, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Here's what I am.
He did not make that up. His dad, Barry told me his dad would sometimes pull out a pistol and just fire holes through the roof of their shack in Arkansas, wherever it was, up on cement blocks. And then Barry's mother shot his dad. And his girlfriend came to pick him up to take him to the hospital. I think I got this right. And then she crashed the car and killed them both. And, you think, okay, this is this guy's upbringing. And here he is now. He's got his quarterback, Charles Thompson. I said, where'd you find a talent like him? Because they're running the wishbone. He said, well, I found him. He was breakdancing on a big piece of cardboard at a car dealership in Lawton. This is new.
Rick, how do you played college football in the late 60s, early 70s at Northwestern. How did you think playing college football informed you as a writer covering college football?
Well, everybody can watch the game. And I'm not one of these people that feel you have to, if you want to write about war, you had to be a soldier. You want to write about politics, you had to be a politician. I think observation can give you a lot. But also, I do believe that being inside locker rooms, and being there, knowing what a coach's word means to you, knowing the relation you had with your teammates, seeing, know how you depended on each other, that at certain times you felt this almost like rapture. The whole was greater than the parts. All of you working together. When that happens, it's actually transcendent. I mean, you feel this love for this other guy. It's just incredible. And then also the racial things that I saw in the team. It's hard for me to believe that my freshman class, all the scholarship players, 25 or so, all white. Every one of us is white. I thought, what is going on? There were black guys before me and certainly a lot after, but none in my class. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me.
1968, the entire class?
Where are the black guys? And because I knew they were out there. I'd played against them in high school. And I've seen coaches do things to players, my buddies, my teammates, demean them in ways that, I still haven't gotten over. Because the power that a coach has over you is 100%. It is total. You don't play unless the coach puts you in. And it's almost always somebody that's almost as good as you or better.
You mentioned race. I always thought, looking back through the prism of time, in that era in the mid to late 80s, you had the whole Notre Dame versus Miami thing going on, and I always felt that was racially tinged in many respects.
Absolutely.
You were on the front lines of that. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they had those T-shirts, Catholics versus convicts. I actually wrote about that. Notre Dame had all the Catholics, allegedly, and Miami had convicts. I mean, both sides had troubled people and had trouble with the law. I actually went to Miami. Jimmy Johnson was the coach. And I went around and started asking guys. Miami had far more Catholics on its starting team than Notre Dame did. I think Steve Walsh was the quarterback. The offensive line was from all over, but I think they were all Catholics. Tony Rice, I believe, was the quarterback for Notre Dame. He was Baptist. So It was, everything. Listen, the whole world is racial. In America, everything's about race. We're dealing with it today. I thought we'd solved a lot of things in the 60s with all the tumult, but we didn't. We just kicked them down the road. And I saw things happening in football that were very unusual, and I knew had to change.
Yeah, and you end up writing a great book about that. In 1989, you came out with your book, The 100-Yard Lie, The Myths and Corruption of college football? Because, again, you had the experience of your own playing career, but then you're covering this Wild West era of college football. What led to that book? And when you look back on it, I know you've updated it even recently. Where does that book stand and all the things you have done in your writing career for you?
Well, that was kind of my testimony to what I had seen that I thought was unique. Again, my position, having played football, having gone to, played in the Big Ten, played in some big games, played in huge stadiums, traveled, done all this stuff, played the Coliseum in LA, played in the, at Ohio State there, the 100,000 or whatever people wanting to kill you, which I understood. All that, seeing it all, and then just putting it all together. What is wrong here? And somebody once said to me, actually an editor at Sports Illustrated, because I'd just seen too much. He said, Rick, you know what? You should never see how the sausage is made. And that's kind of an edict that I believe is absolutely true. But once you do see how the sausage is made, what you do see behind the curtain, you see, the Wizard of Oz behind that curtain with the levers, you see the hypocrisy, you see the fraud, you see the racism, you see the imperialism, you see the money-making, the greed, you see all those things. You'll see it if it's politics. You'll see it if it has to do with business. Anything you look at too closely, this is what you're going to find, because we're humans and we're flawed and faulty and frail. So when I wrote that book, The 100-Yard Lie, the first time, I put everything in there that I could think of, that I had seen, that I just thought was wrong. Coaches abusing players, guys who shouldn't be in school, players not getting even remotely anything resembled in education, being used up, injured, and just discarded like, waste. And then I saw the coaches starting to exploit all this. I saw the coaches themselves in weird ways being corrupted in ways they didn't want. I felt a lot of them really just wanted to coach football. Mm-hmm. And they started to see the money that was there, the ancillary aspects to it. Cheating became, I saw the whole fraud of amateurism.
I'm Allison Holland, host of the Kennedy Dynasty podcast. Equipped with a microphone and a long-term fascination of the Kennedy family, I am joined by an incredible cast of experts, friends, and guests to take you on a fun, relaxed, yet informative journey through history and pop culture. From book references to fashion to philanthropy to our modern expectations of the presidency itself, you'll see that there is so much more to Kennedy than just JFK or conspiracy theories. Join me for the Kennedy Dynasty podcast.
Well, before we leave football, I wanted to steer over to professional football, which has its own issues, but in some ways is more. It is a business, right?
Yeah,
it tells you right up front that these are paid mercenaries.
Yeah.
And so in the 80s, you're a Chicago guy, and in football, you immediately think, well, 85 Chicago Bears, and you were around that team and those characters. Man, what a cast of characters, right?
Oh my God! Again, the big fulcrum there, the lever is there was no internet. There's no cell phones. Nobody's taking pictures of what these guys are doing off the field. I lived next door to the Bears training camp, next door to Hallis Hall. Literally the fence that was my backyard, and the backyard was only about maybe 20 feet. And then there were bushes on the other side of this fence, chain link fence, and that was the Bears practice field. There was also the Lake Forest College Division III Foresters game field. So they would tear it up, and then the Bears would practice on it. It was ridiculous. 100-yard field, that's all it was. And nobody's
you got the best football team on the planet.
Exactly.
Practicing on this field that's 100-yard field that's all torn up.
Grass. And when they would play, when the Foresters would play like Ripon or Lawrence or somebody, in, say, late October, it'd be a rainstorm, and they would tear the living hell out of that field. It was just mud. But then it would freeze. It was horrible. It was just horrible. Nobody's there. I could look out my window, and I could see, Mike Ditka. I could see Jim McMahon. Walter Payton and these other guys would come to the fence right next to my house because there are all these bushes, and they didn't want to go all the way, the 120 yards, through the end zone, indoors to Hallis Hall if they had to take a leak. So I'd be on my little deck there, and I'd look out and say, hey, get out of here. I'd yell, scare these guys half to death. like I was going to call the cops.
I mean, they're watering your grass, right?
It didn't come through. Anyway, it was funny. So I finally ended up cutting a hole in the fence. So I could walk right there. I'd be on the field in, 3 seconds. I was literally right there. So Jim Harbaugh was then the quarterback later in the 90s. And we talked one time. He actually had suggested, asked me if maybe I'd want to sell my house to him because he could be right there, on the field. Literally, he could if you were fast, he could get inside the meeting room like 20 seconds, cutting through that fence. Eventually, the college put a new fence in, boarded up everything that I had done.
You mentioned Ditka, so he's got this team with all these characters, McMahon and all these guys, Hampton and all these guys. McMichael, just legendary, like folk tales about these guys. You wrote a couple books with Ditka. What made Ditka the right coach for that team, especially in the magical year of '85?
That's a very good question. I think that his inner fire, which is just there, it's like bubbling, it's like a cauldron. You want to be careful it doesn't blow up around you. I think that was just the right moment for the great talent that they had. He was perfect for 1 year. And they should have repeated, but they could never get a quarterback. McMahon could never stay healthy. They brought in one quarterback after the other, from Doug Flutie, on and on and on. And so they could never get that straight. But that one moment, the ferocity that he had, that everybody knew about, you knew about it from him being a player. He was not your typical head coach. He was not a X's and O's, spend endless amounts of time in devising schemes. He did do that, but he took the offense and the defense, a whole separate team. With Fensick, McMichael, Hampton, don't forget the Fridge was there, Mike Singletary, Otis Wilson. I mean, these guys were incredible. Les Frazier in the backfield. They had their own coach.
Yeah.
They had Buddy Ryan. I'm sure you recall after they won the Super Bowl, just annihilated the Patriots. They hoisted both Buddy Ryan and Ditka onto their shoulders when they came off the field. I don't think that's ever been done before. Defensive coordinator and the head coach.
You played defense in college. What made that 46 defense of Ryan so special, besides the obvious talent?
Yeah, well, certainly you needed the talent, but it was an aggressiveness that nobody had prepared for. It was just basically saying, we're going to put almost 10 guys on the line. We'll have Gary Fensick, our free safety, be back a little ways, and we're going to take the receivers. We're going to do everything. You've got these old 5-step drops. They used to have boom, 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 to pat the ball and look downfield. You're not going to make it to 5-step. Forget the 7-step drop. You may roll out. We may have a blitz on from the corner. You're going to get annihilated. And nobody figured out a defense, how to work against it. You can look at some of the defenses, and they're literally all on the line. I mean, every guy's within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage. So
it was crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. And it was vulnerable to a lot of things, but nobody could take advantage of it. They didn't have time. They demolished quarterbacks. In fact, they didn't want to knock Tony Eason out of the game in the Super Bowl. They wanted to keep him in.
Prop him up.
Unfortunately, they did knock him out, and Jim Zorn came in. But this is when you could hit the quarterbacks with their helmet head first. Oh my God, they did stuff to quarterbacks. It was just vicious, and then they'd bark like dogs. Woof, 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 woof.
During the game, right on the field.
Right after something like that, they'd all stand up and bark. It was just. Yes, it was something that within a couple of years, I guess with spread offenses, going to, parts of the run and shoot, doing things, quick passing, other ways to utilize running backs, and that they figured out other ways to work against it. But Buddy Ryan left after that year and became the head coach of the Eagles, and that kind of destroyed it.
Right. But
that year was absolutely transcendent. And the characters, don't forget the Fridge was there, William Perry. There weren't 320-pound guys in the league back then. And
not an entire league, much less, now it's like common, right? But
now every team has
a freak show.
Now every team has, I usually count 8 to 12 guys who are 300 pounds or more right in that area. A lot of guys are listed at 299. That cracks me up. who weighs 299 pounds. Anyway, the fridge.
Biscuit shy.
The fridge, yes. Oh, God, they would tease him. But Ditka saw that Buddy Ryan wasn't using him. This guy probably at times weighed up to, 340 pounds. But he said, I saw this, they're running little 10-yard sprints. I saw this dirt flying from behind his cleats. He said, I can use this guy. So he carried the ball. He caught a touchdown pass. They put him in the backfield because Ditka always carried a grudge against the 49ers for putting, what was his name, some offensive lineman in the backfield when they
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Guy McIntyre was his name. That's who it was. And he was a great big guy, 280, something like that. Wasn't 300. And Bill Walsh put him in the backfield. Ditka thought, I don't like that. So anyway, he used the fridge. His characters were such good players, too. Don't forget, Jim Tobert just got put into the Hall of Fame, offensive tackle. It was great. And there's so many guys on defense. Richard Dent. Didn't even mention Richard Dent. You had no prayer. You had the quarterbacks, you could see they were scared when they played against this 46.
Yeah, I think the ferocity is what stands out in my mind. And you don't always have that, in football. I mean, you have to love the game, but some guys just really love to hit.
Yes, they do.
And you had that as a collection of Bears on that defense.
Yeah, it was a collection also. Don't forget of first rounders. They really collected a lot of talent. And then you had that middle linebacker position, going from Dick Butkus and then to Singletary, because Brian Urlacher after that was just a rare position in and of itself. And they had Mike Singletary, who was, hellfire and brimstone like a preacher. I remember talking to him one time, Mike, you hit guys so hard. He broke like over a dozen helmets when he was playing at Baylor. So sometimes he'd break it, just his head was stuck right in his shoulders. He had no neck, basically. If you could look at it, it was like right there. Perfect for football. It looked like a missile. And I said, when you hit somebody so hard, what's it like? He said, he was almost like a preacher. He said, you feel this contact, this force, and he feels it. And it's good for you, and it's good for him. It's like, this explosion. It's like, bam, man. Okay, this is something, out of body.
and then they had one of the all-time great players ever on offense in Walter Payton. And not just a great player, but a great guy. The NFL Man of the Year award's named after him. When you think about Payton, what comes to mind from your time around him?
I think of a guy who was childlike, not childish, but childlike, had this happiness to him, but also this drive that was inside, kind of like Ditka. I think Walter was probably ADHD, He's like, he had to be moving. He's drumming all the time. He's always moving. He could be standing there, and if nothing was happening, he'd come up and pinch your leg. Everybody knows this from behind. It's so hard that he can leave like a huge black and blue mark. He thought that was funny. But he would do stuff like that. It was always like a love tap to Walter. He was lighting firecrackers. He would call Ditka and, disguise. They'd have voicemail. He'd disguise his voice. It's like he was a Mexican female. He could do all these different voices. Oh, God, yeah. This is Juanita. Anyway, he would do stuff like that. He, I don't know. And then inside of him, the beating he took was just incredible. Just incredible. And I've always wondered if that liver ailment, liver cancer or whatever they found it, bile duct cancer, had anything to do with the beating he took as a player. Because there were times I saw him on the sideline, and he would come back wobbly from a play, and he would literally take a smelling salt, crack him, that ammonia, and just like breathe it. You do that once, anybody try that once, your head will jerk back. It's beyond belief. And he would just need that thing to like come to again. Then he'd go back in on the next play. His desire was probably so off the charts that it transcended his very body. He should not have been doing what he was actually doing.
Wonder where that came from, that desire.
Part of it came, well, first of all, it's innate. We don't understand the human psyche. I certainly don't understand that. But his older brother, Eddie, had set a lot of records. He was a very good player, smaller than Walter, but really good at Jackson State and in high school. And as best I can tell, he was a bit of a bully. There's this real competition between the two of them. I mean, real, serious. You could get them. I mean, Eddie loved Walter, but there was this thing like, I just want to kick his ass, too. And I think Walter felt that towards Eddie, maybe going a little too far, but the transference of, that could have been part of it. Brothers, but just the two of them. And,
that's interesting.
You can psychoanalyze it all you wanted to, but something inside of him, being from the deep South, if this guy goes to Jackson State, are you kidding me? Not LSU, not Ole Miss, not Miami, not Arkansas, not any of these places, because racism was absolute in the South. And, more hidden, but absolute up north, too. And I think Walter, underneath, like a lot of black guys who were able to cover it, maybe like even a lot of black bluesmen from the South, you get underneath, you tap it, there's this rage there. Rage against society, rage against unfairness, rage about being treated wrongly. This guy should have been the Heisman Trophy winner at some big school. He was that good in college. He was unbelievable. But he's at a little dinky, traditional black college. All these guys. Hell, when I went to the Chiefs, when I got drafted there, they had all kinds of guys from Grambling, from Morgan State. Willie Lanier was from Morgan State. Who's ever even heard of it? It's in Baltimore.
Yeah, think about it. That's how the great Steeler teams of the 70s was built, is they recruited, or not recruited, they drafted guys out of the black colleges. And
those guys could have played. They could have played in the Big Ten. They could have played anywhere. Buck Buchanan. I mean, are you kidding me? 6'8", 275, or maybe 6'6", and this guy can't play in a Big Ten team, so he go to some little dinky school. I mean, it was really, I think, something that drove Walter more than anybody has ever really talked about or can ever prove.
Well, he certainly channeled it in a productive way as a football player and was known as a great person, hence the NFL award named Man of the Year after him. And he's certainly one of the most beloved sports figures in Chicago. And obviously, during your time as a sports writer in Chicago, there's another guy who's also become so well known that he's an international figure, and that's this guy named Jordan, I believe, Michael.
Mike, number 23, Air Jordan. Just saw an article today, who's the greatest basketball player of all time. I think it was in USA Today, and they said, is it Kareem, LeBron, or Michael? And the answer was yes.
Yeah, exactly, right.
That was really good. Yeah, really good.
Right.
That's one of the reasons I left Sports Illustrated. Probably could be the main reason that he was not going to talk to Sports Illustrated anymore. This is 1994. And
you left in 95. Right?
Yes, I did. And I loved Sports Illustrated. I loved the editors there, the writers, the freedom, the intellect, everything about it.
But Jordan wasn't going to talk to him because of the baseball cover story.
Exactly.
He went to the minor league baseball, right?
Exactly. The one that said, "Bag it, Michael." Michael Jordan and the White Sox embarrassed baseball. And
so Michael Jordan playing baseball led to you going to the Chicago Sun-Times.
Pretty much. If anybody cares, yes, it did. Because I was not going to spend – the guy had just been named, would soon be named the greatest athlete of the 20th century. I was not going to spend my career not being able to write about this guy. And I knew him. I'd seen him at Bulls practices. I'd written about him. I did a cover story on him for Sports Illustrated back in, I want to say, 1987. It was after his rookie year, and then his second year he injured his foot, and then the next year he came back with a fire that was beyond belief. So anyway, I knew him. We got along. I really liked him. I mean, a fascinating guy.
What did you like about him?
I loved his personality, the way he could look out of the room and read it. He used to tell me, I was really a bad kid when I was a kid. People think, well, he must have been Mr. Perfect. I mean, he was, I believe, this close to maybe going the other way, being a real bad kid and being a bad adult if it hadn't been for basketball or something else. Because he had this mischievousness. He was mischievous. He was also, he was a little like Walter in that regard, but he also had, what was it? He saw things a little differently. He was not going to play the game. It gave him the courage to create on the floor. It gave him this passion to not only win, but to destroy the opponent. And I remember one time I asked him, I said, do you have to win? What is it? Do you have to win all the time? Is it just winning that's the thing? He said, no, it isn't really. I can't stand the thought of another man making his name off of me. And so that was it. It wasn't, he just didn't want to lose. Winning was kind of irrelevant, but you're not going to beat me. So however you want to look at that kind of equation, that's how it was.
Do you have a favorite anecdote about Jordan from your time around him? Something that really speaks to who he was, not just as a basketball player, but what he was about.
Well, two things really. One was him playing with the flu game. I mean, he was sick. You could see it. This guy, you ever had the flu? We've all had it, or food poisoning. There's usually about a 6 hour, maybe 12-hour window where you'd rather die. I mean, you can't do it. Your head hurts, your eyes hurt, your skin hurts. It's just horrible. To see him play through that was astounding out in Utah. And then the other thing was they had just were dedicating the James Jordan Boys and Girls Club, named after his father, who'd been murdered.
Right.
And it was a brand new building, and Jordan was there with Juanita, and Mayor Daley was there. There were a lot of dignitaries, a lot of swells there, and the press all around. And we go in, we're going around different rooms, and they go into the art room, and there's a teacher there, this young woman, and she's so nervous, it's beyond belief. And she has to talk a little, like what's going to happen in here. And she's kind of, they'll be painting, we'll do clay and stuff, and finger painting, and she just kind of couldn't even go on. And Michael steps forward and says, what you're saying is the room will never be this clean again. And everybody laughed, she laughed, and it was just the whole tension demolished, diminished. And anybody could have done what he said, what he did, but he's the one that read it.
That's interesting because that's like very empathetic, and I always think of him as more like an assassin, and yet here he is reading the room and seeing what she needed in that moment.
Yeah. Somebody can be that sarcastic and that mean to somebody like Jerry Krause, who he never forgave Krause, meant that he had that intuitive empathy where he'd go against the empathy. Like he knows what he could say to you to be nice. I'm going to say the opposite because I'm a bad dude. But he understood it. And that to me always, I just like, wow, that's incredible. That's like somebody who's putting their arm around somebody when they're feeling down, like somebody's vastly your superior. That was something. It always stayed with me.
Do you think it made him a better basketball player, and how?
I think it made him, I think that was something that he had over other players. Like, they would always joke about Scottie Pippen being from Hamburg, Arkansas. He's just a country bumpkin. And he was like the youngest of 13 or something like that. Well, Jordan would tease him. Jordan was into teasing because he knew how to get at you. He knew what your vulnerability was because that ability to read your weakness on the floor, whatever it might be. Maybe you don't like to go to your right. Maybe you can't handle my crossover. Maybe I know you can jump and everything, but you can't do a thing about my follow-away, my fadeaway jumper. And I think that was, I really think that was part of his personality, which was fascinating to me, his personality. I mean, first of all, this guy was a splendid, unique athlete. He had hands that were so big, love to shake hands with him. I shook hands with Dr. J, too. And it's hilarious. Your fingers come halfway up your wrist. He had really long
your arm.
I mean, really long arms, really long legs, not a particularly long torso. He was just magnificent, broad-shouldered, and then he was like a panther, the way he can move, his agility. And I think that he understood all that. I have something nobody else has. Nobody. And here we go. You guys are going to eat it, every one of you. And if you ever try to make your name off me, which a couple guards did, they might have had a good game in a series. Like I remember B.J. Armstrong was playing on the other team for the Hornets or whatever, and he celebrated after they beat the Bulls.
Right.
And B.J. was a tough player. I remember he was missing a front tooth, had been knocked out. He just kept playing. But he celebrated, and Jordan's like, Don't do that computer. You will die. And my God, it just demolished him the next game and on. He never forgot stuff like that. Just like with Jerry Krause. Never forgave him for not playing him when he felt that his foot had healed and he could have kept playing. They would take him out after a certain amount of minutes, and it drove Jordan crazy.
And he never forgot the Sports Illustrated cover when he played baseball, right?
Yeah.
It's like he would file away these grievances and take them out on
to this day,
people.
That was 1994, so that's 27 years ago. He has not spoken to Sports Illustrated. And I just thought, you guys, I've talked to the editors there about it. I said, guys, when I saw the cover, I said, do you know what you're doing here? I mean, is he really embarrassing baseball? I thought it was an incredibly noble move. The guy was not a bad baseball player. He batted like 206 or something. He hit a few home runs.
206, he'd be playing today in the majors.
Absolutely. Even Jerry Reinsdorf said if we'd given him more time, I think this guy could have made the majors. I remember one time he was down there with Birmingham, or maybe it was with actually the Sox, something. I was watching a game, and he was on first, and somebody hit the ball. It was a force play at second, and he was trying to fake the second baseman out with a move. I said, Michael, the second base doesn't move. You're not going to get it to fall off its feet. He was figuring out the difference between basketball and baseball. But to say that he embarrassed baseball because he tried it during the strike, when the entire major leagues were full of scrubs and they called off the World Series, it wasn't him embarrassing baseball.
Yeah.
He was taking
not a good headline. Not a good editorial choice there.
Not for the guy that never forgets. Nope. So that was 27 years. He's been on the cover a lot since, never spoken to the magazine since.
Well, we're never going to forget Jordan. He's the basketball player, perhaps of all time. You can argue all you want, but he's certainly the guy who defined his generation, his era. And it's funny, Rick, you were a football player, as we've mentioned. But really, basketball has been kind of a defining theme throughout your whole journalism career, going back to, as you mentioned, your first book, Heaven is a Playground, the great book about your time up in New York in the playgrounds of the early 70s, summer of 73. You write the article for Sports Illustrated, and then the next year you go back to Brooklyn. What is it about basketball that always drew you as a writer?
Well, I've thought about that a lot. I love the game. I just love the way it works. 5 guys against 5. Or the beauty of it is 3-on-3, 2-on-2, 1-on-1, or just shoot by yourself. Shoot free throws, or do jumpers. I've seen games of what the hell they get 21. I remember I was living down in Florida and go to the local gym, and there'd be like 25 guys. That's where you shoot, and whoever gets a rebound takes the ball back. You can shoot. It'd be mayhem, like a mob, and they're playing this game with 21. You can do so many things with the game. When James Naismith invented it in 1891, Springfield, Massachusetts, it was immediately popular. Immediately. Everybody liked it. Women liked it. Kids liked it. It's a global game where every person on the court has the opportunity to do everything. That is, pass, dribble, shoot, defend, whatever else, hot dog, hog the ball, everything. But just because you're, like in baseball, you're a pitcher, nobody else is going to pitch. You come to bat. It's just you. But basketball, just seeing the way it worked, I liked it. I loved the ball. When I was a kid, I'd listen to Bradley basketball games back home in Peoria, and I'd dribble my ball through the house, and my mom would, stop it, Rick, you can't do that. Go outside. Be dead winter. I'd go outside and dribble the ball, come back in, listen to the radio. It was a nice orange Voight ball. It gets so cold.
The Voight ball.
Voight.
Right.
Oh, man, I love Voight. Remember Voight?
Oh, I dribbled the Voight ball in February.
Well, so I did, and it'd be frozen. So I'd take it in and put it in the sink in a bath of warm water. Because we had a gravel driveway. Didn't even have cement. Get all the dirt, gravel off it, warm it up, the orange, warm my hands up, which were frozen, go back out and keep dribbling and stuff. So I like that, and I like the fact that there's so much history tied in with basketball. Particularly race is absolutely embodied by basketball, from the Harlem Globetrotters to the city game, which is what I was following up. Pete Axthelm, God love him, wrote part of his book, The City Game, was about New York street basketball. We didn't really investigate it, but I said, man, I want to see this. I want to see the cradle of it. So I just did.
So how did you do that, Rick? You go up to Brooklyn in 74 to summer. How did you report that book? What did you do?
Well, I had no idea what I was doing, first of all, Todd. There's no blueprint. I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know what you did. I knew how long a book was. You know, it wasn't like you could go online and say, here, you know, get all of this stuff, YouTube video and something. This is what you do, kids. Do this and do that. So I just had notebooks. I had those composition books, you know, those cardboard ones you all had, kind of blue or green, scattered looking covers. And they had maybe 100, 120 pages in it. And I drew a line down it, and I would write down one column and the next, just my observation. What do you see? Well, I'm walking up Nostrand Avenue towards the park, Foster Park. There's all these kids on bicycles, you know, zipping through, they're doing wheelies. There's this broken glass in the gutters. There's old men passing around a bottle of wine, you know, in a sack. And then all of a sudden this asphalt court opens up, this asphalt court, 3 of them, and it's like this cacophony, if I can use that word, it's music of dribbling. Yelling and screaming and, you know, pass the ball and all the noise of the clang off the rim and stuff.
Right.
And it's like, man, I just walked into Oz, you know?
And there's something about the playground, too. I mean, it drew you in the early 70s up in New York. You went back a couple times for Sports Illustrated. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask you quickly about was in 2017 for the Sun-Times, you saw a way that basketball fit into a certain community at Orr Academy in Chicago. And tell me about why you ended up going to Orr Academy in 2017 to write about a basketball team that's really in the heart of all this poverty and violence in Chicago.
Yeah, Orr is on the west side on Chicago Avenue. It's 4,000 west, I want to say. So anyway, you can look straight up Chicago Avenue to the lake and look right at the Hancock building. You're looking at it, but it might as well be another country. I had already written a story, or a series, about a park on the south side that Derrick Rose frequented in Englewood, which is, again, a violence just plagued area. It's called Murray Park, sometimes known as Murder Park. And Derrick made it out of there somehow. And I wanted to see how. I wanted to see the workings of that park. But so then time went by, and there was so much killing in Chicago, so much bloodshed, so much horror, that how does any kid transcend this? How does he come out of this and play something as functional as a game of basketball? And somehow make it, literally, I mean, physically make it to school sometimes. So I talked to our prep writer, Michael O'Brien at the Sun-Times. I said, who would be a good coach? I don't want to go to the south side. I don't want to do Simeon or, you know, whatever else is down that way. I want to go out west, be Marshall or somewhere else. And he said, you know what? This coach, he thought he named it to you and gave reasons why I might not like them or they might not work. This is a coach named Lou Adams. Lou is a fiery guy. He's out at Orr Academy. And one thing I like about him is he'll never lie to you. I said, well, okay, that's my guy. I called Lou, and Lou said, of all things, because all he has to be your mentor. Lou said, come on out. So I embedded with Lou Adams. He's a guy from Tunica, Mississippi. He had an outhouse. I mean, you talk about somebody from the deep south, didn't have plumbing, all that stuff. And here he is, he's a coach. He had stories. I didn't know it at the time, but he'd been shot years earlier. He wasn't in a gang. I mean, who knows all of anybody's past? But he was there at Orr, and he said, yeah, you can follow us. And I did. And unbeknownst to me, this team was going to win the state championship. I mean, I had no idea, none, zero. It's just a team. This is where I wanted to be, in the heart of the violence and the shootings and the gangs and all this. How does somebody transcend what's around them? And they win the state championship.
Yeah, Orr Academy goes on and wins the 2A Illinois State Championship. And it's like, you talked about Oz, it's like you're there. You're right there. And this whole story unfolds of the success of this team, but really, what did it mean to the community? I think that's what it's all about.
You know, I think it meant a huge amount. I hope people were dragged along with it, the success. I hope the players were. I hate to tell you, but one of the guys I really liked, was a good guy. Was going to junior college and was going to a 4-year college this year. I think he was going to be a junior. He got arrested for murder. And the story, he shot and killed somebody. Yeah, but it was defense. Maybe he went a little too far afterwards, but it's just a horrible, sad story. And he got sucked in. He was trying to make it out. He truly was. And the full story, I hope, comes out. I hope they have mercy on him. I called Lou Adams, and he said, yeah, man, I'll keep you posted. But I hope the others can make it, because the odds of being, I said in my series, if I were a young man on the West Side, knowing what I know about myself in high school, as a teenager, the kind of kid I was, I wouldn't have made it. And I know that. I feel that. You need something or somebody to help you out of this mess. And who that person is, I don't know, man. It's almost an intractable problem. But God, my heart goes out to every one of those kids on the team.
Well, it's an amazing series, and I really recommend people to go back and take a look at that. Rick, you go into this community, and you, like you mentioned the word see, you're looking to see something beyond just what's the obvious, right? What else is going on? And, I think about my time in sports, and people would joke, oh, you're in the toy department, and it was kind of a put-down thing. But
yeah,
but really, your career has proven that to be a fallacy, because you've done all the reporting, you've built the relationships, you've found the facts, and then you had the insight to bring some light into something so we could see it as readers. And that's why I always had a lot of respect for what you did. You saw more than what was on the chessboard.
Thank you, Todd. You were in it too, and you know what people. It's easy to call it the toy department. I think you might call it the political writers are in the toy department. Think of what we covered in sports. The great racial awakening in America. What else? When they talked about the Globetrotters and the integration of the NBA. Look, Jackie Robinson. Where did that happen? That was sports. Muhammad Ali, sports. Talk about contracts. You talk about fairness. You talk about exploitation. You talk about transcending things to be better human beings, the good part of sports. All those things were right there in front of us. The game is obvious. I mean, the game's there, and sometimes the games are enough to talk about. But the ancillary stuff, that's what always fascinated me. The people, the social movements that are going on. I mean, look at Colin Kaepernick. That's football. Mm-hmm. That was that started the whole Black Lives Matter thing. So I've always been happy to be in sports. Never felt constrained by it at all. I thought the parameters are out there wherever you want to, however far you want to take the stakes and put them out there. That's where sports will take you.
Well, and if you have people like Lou Adams or even Michael Jordan, for that matter, if they'll let you in, if they'll give you the access to take you into their world, then you can help others see it too. And it's been quite an adventure, right?
Yeah, it is. I think part of being a writer, if you want to do like journalism and what we do, what you did and what I do, I think you have to learn how to deal with people, to understand them, to make them like you, if you will. Nobody wants a jerk hanging around with them. Just be somebody that they don't mind having around. Even if you don't say anything, you're just there, you're watching, they let you observe, and what happens all around you. Ask the right questions.
Be curious, right? Be curious.
Yeah, be curious. Yeah, that's it, man. Be curious.
Curiosity can take you a long way. Well, it took you here to Press Box Access, and we really appreciate it because you got plenty of other things you could be doing, but to spend some time and talk about your career and the people and places you've been, it's been a real treat. Rick, I really thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Todd. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to Press Box Access. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and follow us on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. We'd love for you to review us. 5 stars would be nice. Follow us on social media. Drop us an email at pressboxaccess.com. And be sure to spread the word. Everyone is welcomed here. This has been a production of Evergreen Podcast. A special thank you to executive producers Michael D'Aloia and Gerardo Orlando, producer Bill Huffman, and our audio engineer Dave Douglas. I'm your host, Todd Jones. It's closing time. Rock on.
I'm Allison Holland, host of the Kennedy Dynasty podcast. Equipped with a microphone and a long-term fascination of the Kennedy family, I am joined by an incredible cast of experts, friends, and guests to take you on a fun, relaxed, yet informative journey through history and pop culture. From book references to fashion to philanthropy to our modern expectations of the presidency itself, you'll see that there is so much more to Kennedy than just JFK or conspiracy theories. Join me for the Kennedy Dynasty podcast.